So what I'm going to do is basically open a Firefox in here. I'm going to Google and find my way through PyCharm IDE. Okay, and I'm going to download it, and I'm going to show you how to install it on your Kali Linux. So go to google.com, and in google.com just search for PyCharm, and this is written as PyCharm. Okay, and if you just Google PyCharm download, then you will have these results in here, and the first result is generally this download PyCharm website. And PyCharm is brought us by JetBrains, and maybe you have heard this company before. So if you have worked with Android Studio, then you definitely have heard this before. And I mentioned that we have several ways to run Python codes, write Python codes in our computers. First of all, we have learned about Jupyter Notebooks, then we moved on to Sublime Text, which is a script editor basically, but now this time we're going to download this PyCharm. This is specifically designed for writing Python codes, and this is a professional IDE, and they have two versions. Actually, one is professional, the other one is community. The community one is for free, you have to pay for professional, and it's really okay us to go with community because we're going to have what we need in this version anyway. So I'm going to go with community in here, and I suggest you do that as well. So just click on download in here, and it will take you to a web page in which you can find the download link. It will automatically start the download process. You have to say save file and click on OK, and it will just start downloading in your downloads folder. And you can reach downloads folder from here or from file manager. I already downloaded this. In order not to make you wait, I suggest you pause the video and come back once you finish downloading. Then what you have to do is just go to files in here to access the files and folder system and search for downloads, and in here you will see this zipped file. Okay, so all the files are zipped in here, and you can extract and just install it in here or anywhere in your computer. But as we discussed before, I suggest to move this to opt directory, where we just install the optional files and folders. So I'm going to find the opt and paste this file in here. Then I'm going to just unzip this file to here. Okay, so right click it, and you can say extract here, and it will extract all the folders and files inside of this file. So once you get this, you can get rid of this zipped file. Okay, so you can just right click on it and say to move to trash once you see this notification in here. And now we are ready to go and install our files. If you double click on it, you will see some folders and files that are necessary to install and run PyCharm on your Kali Linux. And in here we have a txt file in which we can find the instructions for installing the PyCharm. But I'm not going over this because I'm going to show you how to install this anyway, but you can just have a look at it if you want. And we have to do this through terminal, so I'm going to move it to below here. I'm going to open a terminal. First of all, let me zoom in a little bit so we can see it better. Now I have to find this directory below, so I'm going to opt, and I think we are in root, so we are in home, so I have to say cd ... Okay, so if I run pwd, I will see we are in root. So now if I do this, Now I'm nowhere, so I can reach the opt. Okay, so if I do ls, I will see the opt in here. Now I have to change directory to opt, in which I will find my PyCharm directory. So if I do ls, now I see my PyCharm community in here. And let's do cd PyCharm and hit tab. It will autocomplete for me. So now I have access to these files and folders in here. Okay, so what we want to find is this setup.sh, and it's generally located in here, but maybe you have to just look for it if they change the version. But generally you will find this sh, and if you cannot find it, you can just read this installation guide in here, and you can search for the file and folder that you need, but we see it in here. So all I have to do is change directory to here and then run this pycharm.sh to complete the installation. So I'm going to say cd bin. Now if I say ls, I will see pycharm.sh. So now I have to run this bash file. And remember, we can do /, and after that, without any space, I have to say pycharm.sh. And if I hit enter, it will run this file for me. And as you can see, it asks for importing the pre-existing things in my computer. I will say do not import. Maybe I have a pre-existing version of PyCharm in my computer, so I'm going to do this from scratch. So I will say do not import, and it will open this installation wizard for me. So let's make this minimal, and in here say that I confirm this, and just go along with the process. And as you can see, it asks for data sharing. I'm not going to send and share my data in here. So it asks for a theme, whether black or white. Just choose whatever you want. Programs generally choose the black one. Okay, so it asks for if we want to create a launcher script. I don't need this right now. I don't have to have a launcher script. Okay, so I'm going to click on next. Then it asks for if we want to download any featured plugins. No, I don't want, so I will just say start using PyCharm. And we have to start the PyCharm as we did in here from the terminal with running pycharm.sh, but it's not going to ask us this information every time. Rather, we will see this dashboard in here where we can create a new project. Okay, so I'm hitting create new project, and it asks for where we can save this file. Okay, it suggests that we create a PyCharm projects folder in here, and it sounds good. To be more structured, now I will say hello world as a project name. So this is our first software in actually PyCharm, so I'm going to create a hello world project. Later on we will create our own Mac changer project as well. So actually it will take some time for PyCharm to create all folders and files in order to create our project. So I'm going to just unclick this show tips on startup. We don't need any tips from PyCharm at this point. And now actually we are ready. So our first project is created, but I think there are still processes running, and we can see it down below. And once it's finished, now we don't see any processes running, and I think we are completely ready to create our first file and start coding. So let me make this into a full screen PyCharm project window. Now we see a left pane in which we can see the files and folders of our project. So we see the main folder in here, and below it we have some pre-created folders. And we will create our Python files inside this folder. Then we can just reach it through this left pane. And you see there are some menu items here like run, and where we can run this code, or we have some file menu in which we can access the settings. For instance, okay, if you click on settings, it will pop open this window where we can reach and change the theme and every other feature and property of our PyCharm IDE. So maybe you can just search for any settings in here like font. So you can just change the font size, okay? Like if you go here to font, you will see that we now have a size of 12. Maybe we want to increase it later on. So we don't have anything right now. We don't have any file in our project. First, we have to create that file in order to run Python code. So I'm right-clicking on my folder and saying new and Python file. So this will create a Python file for me. I'm doing it again. Right-click, new, Python file. Okay? So there are other options as well, but I'm going to go with the Python file. And as name, you can select whatever you want, but I'm going to call it helloworld.py. So if you say OK, it will create your py file inside your Hello World folder. So we can have more than one file. So you can just print Hello World in here. And as you can see, our font is actually very small, really. And I believe we have to make it bigger. So go to File and Settings once more. And we have to do it all over again. We have to go to Font. And now we have size of 12. Now let's make it 24 or something. Yeah, I think it's better. We can even make it like 26 or 28 and apply. I think it's much better. Let's do it 30 and once and for all end this process. So we can see it clearly now. If I go to run and run this, you have to select whatever you want to run. So I'm going to select Hello World, and it will compile and run my code for me and display the output down below here in the run section. But as you know, we don't always use this. Rather, we prefer saving this and then going to let's find save all, yes, and going to terminal and run this from the terminal here. So PyCharm is now running. If I click on terminal, I have this running terminal in here, so I have to create a new terminal. I cannot close this because PyCharm will close as well. So right click here and say new window, and it will open a new window for you, but it didn't open. So let me try this way. Let's go to terminal right above here and say new window. Yeah, I got it this time. So let's minimize this and zoom in here. Now we are inside our PyCharm. Let's go to cd cd . Actually, we have to do it one more time because I'm going to find my PyCharm projects folder, and we actually created it inside this root folder. If you do ls, you will see PyCharm projects folder in here. So let's go to PyCharm projects, okay, cd into it, and now if you do ls, or let me clear first, if you do ls, you will see the Hello World folder in here. So let's go into that and find our py file in here. If I just say Python hello world it will run this code and just show me the output. So now you know how to work with PyCharm, right? We can write Python codes, we can run Python codes in Kali Linux as well at this point. So we better stop right now, and within the next lecture we're going to create our first make changer software with this PyCharm IDE. Hi, within this lecture we're going to cover MAC addresses and IP addresses once more. We're going to refresh our knowledge. So I believe you know what you get if you type ifconfig in your terminal. So you get these properties, the MAC addresses and IP addresses about your interfaces, right? So I have my ETH0 in here, and I have the local IP of 10.02.15. So I have other information here as well. I have this ether. So this is my MAC address. So this is 080027A1, something like that. And what are these numbers actually? We have seen that before. We covered this in the beginning of this course, but it's been a long time, and maybe you skipped some lectures, or maybe you don't even remember what they were, so I'm going to cover it one more time. So how does this networking thing work in practice? So we have these devices in our home, like phones and MacBooks or computers, and we have a router which connects us to the internet by sending requests and getting some responses, like we do when we ping the google.com. Okay, it sends a ping request to the google.com and it writes out the response to us. And router actually takes care of this problem for us and sends packets to the internet and gets some responses, and it forwards this information to the related devices. And what we have here is a public IP. A router has this public IP, and this is what we use to connect to the internet. And remember, we mustn't share this public IP with anyone, because they can launch some attacks, they can launch some nmap scans through our public IP, they can just try to do some denial of service attacks, okay? And every device on this router, connected to this router or modem, have this public IP, okay? They have all the same public IP, because router has actually this public IP and connects to the internet using that IP, and this is assigned by our service provider. But also we have some local IPs like this one, okay? 192.168.010.011.012, and generally the router has 01 and assigns some other 010, 011, 012 values to the other devices that are in network, okay? So we actually have these local IPs in NAT network as well. We have starting with 10, because we are in NAT network, not a real network. So if we are connected through the NAT network, we have like 10.02.15, 10.02.12, 10.02.20. So it has the same principle. Router just assigns these local IP addresses to us, and it assigns 10.02.1 to itself. Our host machine acts like a router in this case and has the 10.02.1. So we have a MAC address on top of everything. This is used within network connections, and we will understand it better when we deal with ARP responses and requests in the following lectures. But why do we want to even change this MAC address? So for some reasons, bad hackers or good hackers, like ethical and non-ethical hackers, may want to change this MAC address. So if you remember, even our ETH0, our fake connected cable, has its own MAC address in here, right? So every interface, like a wireless card or a wired connection, has its own MAC address, and they are assigned by manufacturers. They are hardware numbers, and they are basically stable and constant. So if I connect a Wi-Fi card in my machine and took it out and connect it to another machine, it won't change. Okay, it will stay the same. So people can tag me, people can follow me using that MAC address. So maybe I want to be anonymous. So maybe I want to change my MAC address in order to be anonymous inside the network, like using VPN when I go to the internet to change my public IP. So this is one reason, and we have other reasons, like we have still these networks that are authorizing the devices regarding their MAC addresses. So they have rules like, you can connect to me if you have this MAC address. So I can change my MAC address to that specific address and be connected to that network. So bad hackers actually use that technique. So at any point, we can change our MAC address, and we have seen how to do that manually before, right? So we can use something called MAC changer. But this time, we will write our own MAC changer in order to achieve these results. So let me stop here, and within the next lecture, we're going to discuss this manually changing the MAC address thing. Hi! Within this lecture, we're going to see how to change our MAC address manually from the terminal. And maybe you think that we have seen how to do that with MAC changer, right? But we're going to see another technique and use that technique in our Python codes as well. So let me open a new terminal in here and run ifconfig. So we have ETH0 in here, and we're going to change the MAC address of that interface. And it really doesn't make sense to change a NAT network's MAC address, right? Because this isn't even a real interface. So if I was using a wireless card, a USB wireless card, then it would make sense to change this, but it doesn't make sense to change the ETH0's MAC address at all. But we're going to do this as a practice. So if you have a wireless card, you can work with WLAN-O as well, but you don't need to. So I'm going to use ETH0, and since it doesn't make sense to change this MAC address, we will lose our internet connection in Kali Linux actually, because it isn't a real interface. So if I was using a WLAN-O with wireless card, then I wouldn't lose my internet connection, and it would have made much more sense. But since we are doing it for practice purposes only, it really doesn't matter. So if I call ping google.com right now, I still have internet connection, but I will lose it afterwards. And it really doesn't matter. I can connect to internet using my host machine anytime. So what we're going to do, we're going to change this MAC address using manual terminal commands. And later on, we will use these commands in our codes in order to learn how to run Linux commands or Windows commands inside Python code. So this is a step for us. We didn't know how to do that before, and we're going to write our first program. So let me clear this terminal and have a clear screen in here, and let me start by running ifconfig one more time. So I'm going to use ifconfig actually, but I'm going to add some more things to ifconfig commands. So rather than saying ifconfig, I will use ifconfig to change the ether. So first of all, I will say ifconfig eth0 down, and it will bring down the current interface. As you can see, yeah, I lost my internet connection at this point. So after this, I will say ifconfig hw ether, and it means that I'm going to change hardware, and I'm going to say eth0 hw ether because I have to specify the interface that I'm changing the hardware of, and I have to change this ether, this MAC address thing. Then I can specify the MAC address that I want, like this one. It has to be 6 pairings, okay? 001122334455, for example. And if I hit enter, it will just change this HW ether value for me. Then I can say ETH0 up, and it brought back the internet connection, but for the reason that I have mentioned before, you must have lost your internet connection at this point. So if I run ifconfig again, I will see that my MAC address is actually changed at this point. So I managed to change the MAC address. All I want to do is just writing a program, a Python code to do that for me. And this will be a very simple example, but we will learn so much new information regarding programming softwares for ethical hacking purposes specifically. So let me go to, where am I? We are in root. So let me go to opt and PyCharm community again to find my PyCharm sh. So it's in the bin. So all I have to do is just /PyCharm sh, and it will open PyCharm for me. And as I said before, we have to run PyCharm this way every time, but it won't ask that boring questions one more time because we have already installed it in our computer. It knows what we want. It will just run and open the PyCharm for us. So let me minimize this, and I think it's opening the old project of Hello World. It really doesn't matter because we're going to create a new project anyway. We're not going to use the existing project in here. So I'm going to file and say new project from here, and I have to change the name, of course. So let me name this like Mac Changer. I have some numerations here as well in order to just supply these codes to you via GitHub or Udemy. It really doesn't matter. So you will say create and click this window. If you click this window, it will get rid of your X project in here. It will close it down and open your new project in the same window. So it created our new project for us, and remember, we have this project right now, but we don't have any Python codes, Python files in here. So go to new here and say Python file. Now I'm going to call it like my Mac Changer, okay, with underscores .py. You may name it whatever you want. If you click on OK, it will create our Python file as well. Now we are ready to run and write our first ethical hacking tool. So if I say print hello world or something like Mac Changer, it will just run this for me. Let me save this and stop here, and within the next lecture we're going to start writing our first piece of code. Hi, within this lecture we're going to learn how to use subprocess module. So subprocess module actually lets us run some Linux or any other operating system's commands inside of our Python code. Okay, so in order to use any module or library or a package, we have to know how to use it, right? We have to read the documentation. So let me delete this and import this subprocess module and then see how it's used in Python. And remember, in order to use a library or a package or a module in our code, all we have to do is just say import and then the name of the library. So in this case it is subprocess. And this comes pre-installed with Kali Linux and PyCharm as well. Even if it wasn't, we still had known what to do, right? We would have installed it with pip install. So let me open a Google here, okay, in my browser, and within Google I will search for subprocess Python library, and then just click on the first result that I see. So in here I see the usage of subprocess module. Let me zoom in a little bit, and as you can see, there is a very good documentation showing me how to use the subprocess. Like, you have to write the commands inside of a list in here. Okay, so all I have to do is just say subprocess.call and just give the command in a list. So I know how it works. I know how to use lists. I know how to change the Mac manually, so I can just take these commands inside of my terminal and just put in here as a list. So all I have to do is just say subprocess.call as in the example, and it asks for a list. Maybe you have seen the little pop-up that occurred in here after I just say .call, and it just reminds me that I have to give an input. So not a curly braces, but just this square braces, and in here I have to just give the command word by word. So if config, okay, and then comma, and then another word, if config eth0 down, for example. If you don't remember, you can just go back to your terminal and look for the command. So this is if config ifconfig eth0 and down. So we're bringing this interface down in this first line, and in the second line what we want to do is just to change the MAC address itself. So again, I'm writing a list in here, and I'm writing ifconfig again, and then ifconfig interface name again, eth0, then a comma. Then remember, I have to say HW stands for hardware, and then ether, okay, so this is for MAC address, and then specify the MAC address that I want to change. So just choose a MAC address that has 6 pairings, like 001122. Let me do it a little bit different from the previous one, so we know it's really changed when we are done with it. Okay, something like that. I think that's really good. And then I have to bring the interface up again. So what do? We call the subprocess one more time. So let me just copy this, because I want to only change the last word here rather than down. I'm going to say up, so let me copy this and go to the bottom and paste it. And rather than down, let me delete this and say up. Okay, so we know that will work if we call this Python file here, and it will change the MAC address. But let me just do a print statement in here and say Mac changer started or something in order for us to know that this is really working. Okay, so do it something like this: my Mac changer started. So I think we are done here. Let me save this file. Okay, let me save all and then bring it down so we can go back to our terminal here. And I have to open a new window because my PyCharm is currently running on the existing one. And in here, let me go to PyCharm projects. Okay, so if I do ls, I will see that my Mac changer is here. So let me ls in here. I see my Mac changer. Let me do python my macchanger.py and hit enter. As you can see, we saw my Mac changer started and then software ended. So if I do ifconfig right now, I will see that my MAC address on my ETH0 is really changed. So we have written our first ethical hacking tool at this point. And maybe right now you might be thinking to yourself that this isn't even a real Python code. So we are just implementing a terminal code. And if this is what we're going to do the rest of the course, then it's no good. And I agree with you. We're not going to run some terminal codes inside of our Python code at all. But we have to know how to run this. We have to know how to run some Linux or Windows commands in our Python code, and this is a great example. And of course, we will build on this. We're not gonna leave this as it is, and we're going to actually spend 2 sections on this Mac changer alone, so that we really know what we are doing. We're really going to get deep into this. So let me stop here, and within the next lecture we're going to introduce variables inside of this code. Hi! Within this lecture we're going to see how to use variables inside of this code. So we have this interface here, right? ETH0, and actually we have this interface in 3 lines together. And we have to make this into a variable so that user can choose whatever interface they want to use inside of this code. So it will be easier for our user to edit the code or just give an input to this code as well. So we can actually just take this MAC address out of here and make it into a variable as well, because a user may have to change it to another MAC address as they're choosing. So you know actually how to do it, right? So all you have to do is just create a variable for that, like interface in here. And for example, I will say my interface is actually ETH0. So rather than saying ETH0 in here, I will delete this and say interface instead. Then, of course, I'm going to do the same thing for these 3 lines together. So let me delete this and say interface, and then for the last line as well, interface in here. Next thing, I'm going to do the same for MAC address. So I will create a MAC address in here, okay, above, and let me just specify a MAC address like 002233 and something different from the previous one, okay, 7799 and 11 for instance. And rather than just giving this static text or string in here, let me delete this and give the MAC address variable. So this is going to work, right? Just save this and try if it really works. So let me go back to my terminal here. We have still terminal inside of my Mac changer folder, so I can just call this. And as you can see, it's already executed, and if I say ifconfig, then I will see it really changed my MAC address on ETH0. So this works out pretty well. But the next big question is that how do we get input from the user for this ETH0 and MAC address? Because in this case, if we leave our code like that, then the only option will be left for user to open this Python code and edit the code. But we don't want that. What do we want here is actually this. We have to specify some code so that our user can give the input while they are using terminal. So let me show you what I mean. If I do ifconfig -- here, then I can specify an input like help. If I hit enter, it will show me the help explanation of this ifconfig command. And so here, as you can see, user gave an input to the command of ifconfig as help, and it does something else rather than just running ifconfig, right? So we can take inputs in the command line. So we can take inputs in the terminal. So what I really want is that enabling user to run this in our Python code as well. So if a user wants to specify an interface or a MAC address in our code, they can use terminal and they can just choose whatever they want. But in order to do that, we have to know some other module, some other library. And it's called actually the opt parse. So we have to learn how to use this another module. So let me import this, okay? And it's called opt parse and it's written like this. And this comes pre-installed as well. So with using this module, we can take inputs from the user. And in fact, there are two libraries to do that. One is opt parse as we use it here, and the other one is arg parse, like an argument parser. And let me show you first the opt parse in here. I'm not going to go over the documentation, Googling part. I'm going to show you how to use it directly. But you can search it and just study it yourself if you want more features for opt parse. In order to use opt parse, you have to create a parser object. Okay, I'm going to call this parse object, and you have to do it like this: opt parse dot option, okay, like this, option parser. So option parser. So what does it do? It creates an instance of option parser class, and it just assigns it to be a parse object variable inside my code. Then I can use this parse object variable and add option to it. So it asks for args and keywords, as you can see. So this is arbitrary arguments and keyword arguments like we have learned before. And you have to know what kind of arguments that you're going to give or supply in this case. So let me show you how to do it. First, we have to specify the command that will be taken from the user when this option will be used. What do I mean? Maybe we are going to take the interface and we can call it like I or interface in this case, and we have to specify the name of the option first. And the general convention in here, you specify two names, one with one dash and the other one with two dashes. So it goes like this, like dash I for interface, okay, it stands for the interface, and then you specify another argument with two dash, and you write the full name of this name option. Okay, so this is interface, and we're just choosing whatever we want. We would have called this like K or X, and you could have called this anything you want. But in order to comply with the convention in here, I'm choosing the appropriate words. I'm saying interface and I, so my user can understand it better when they see it. And other than that, we have to supply some keyword arguments as well. And if you read the documentation, you will see that you have to specify a destination, so we can reach this option in our code. And in order to do that, you will have just add a comma in here, and after that you say dest, it stands for destination, and it will be equal to something, some variable, okay? And in this variable I will call this interface as well. So this interface will be equal to this interface. So whatever I call here, I have to make the variable name as the same thing, okay? And later on, you can just write a help as well, like we have seen in ifconfig case. So within here, within the help function, within help keyword, you have to specify how to use this parse object thing. So maybe you can say something like this is going to change your interface or something, okay? Interface to change, for example. Now we have created our first option, and when a user gives an input using terminal, we will take this input and save it to a variable called interface so that we can use it in our code. So I believe you have now understood what I'm talking about, but you need more practice to grasp it better. So let's stop here, and within the next lecture we're going to finalize this. Hi, within this lecture we're going to finalize our opt parse in here, and we're going to see how to just process the data that we get from the user input. In order to do that, let me add the second option as well, which is our MAC address, right? So I'm going to do this a little bit faster than before. So I have to specify the arguments. First of all, I am going to call this M for MAC address, and with 2 dashes, I will say MAC, okay? And this is okay for arguments. Now I have to specify a destination. So for dest, I will say MAC address, like I said below here, and they have to be identical, remember? So MAC underscore address, and then I will specify an help in here. I will say MAC address to change or something, new MAC address, for example. So after specifying this, actually I'm done with the parse objects, okay? Actually I'm done with the options here. But after the options, I want to get the input data and then process it and then use it in my own code. So let me print this and see how to get it. So in order to do this, I will say parse object dot parse arguments, okay? So let me print this only, and let me save this file and then test it if we made everything right. So what will happen, the interface will not be th0 anymore, because we don't need this line, because we're going to get the user input, and we're going to use the user input in subprocess.call. But we have to just process it first. So let me just comment out this line actually, so that we can see it better and we won't get any errors. So let me put hashes in here. Later on I will delete them. So we will work only with parse option, parse arguments. So let me try this MAC address and interface thing. So how do we do it? I will say python my macchanger.py again, and of course I have to add this I and then specify the ETH0, for example, or WLAN O, whatever you are working with, and then the MAC address with -m, and then with a space I will specify 001122334455. If I hit enter, as you can see, I get this result in here. So I printed out the parse object and I get something like a dictionary. It looks like a dictionary, right? Interface ETH0, MAC address, and this is the input that we have given. So I have to get these lines, I have to get these inputs in order to just use it in my code. So if it's a real dictionary, if I say interface with a square braces, it should give me the interface. So before we do that, let me try this as well. --interface ETH0 --mac to specify the MAC address and see if this works as well, because we have specified this argument as well. Yeah, it works. Interface ETH0 MAC address is the same as we have given. So as I said before, I have to process this input and get the user input and use it on my own. So first of all, let me try and get these inputs by using dictionary features. So we have worked with dictionaries before, right? So what did we do? We have used some square braces to get the relevant data. So let me cast this to a variable here, okay, say option dictionary rather than parse dictionary, okay, option dictionary, and this is going to be equal to parse object dot parse arguments. So rather than printing this out, I will try to print out option dictionary and open a brace here. Okay, so let me just first of all, let me try to print this and see if it works. Yeah, it's printing. I'm getting this. Okay, so no worries in this step. I'm still getting the ETH0 and the MAC address that I have specified. So let me go back and try to get one of these inputs like MAC address, okay, MAC underscore address. So let me save this once more and then go back and try to run this. So if I run this, I will get an error. So as you can see, I have a type error in which I get this message. It says that tuple indices must be integers, not string. So at this point, I understand that this isn't even a dictionary, okay? This is a tuple. And if you go and read the documentation, you will see that this parse args method actually returns a tuple, not a dictionary. So we have to treat this like a tuple, and it's actually a tuple, and we are trying to treat this as a dictionary, so this won't work. So if you go and read the documentation, you will see that this is a tuple and it returns two values in the tuple, okay? So you have to do it like this. Open a parenthesis if you please, and you can do it without parentheses as well. And this will give me user inputs and the arguments, okay? So I have to get the user inputs, and I can get the user inputs from this point on easily, right? So this will contain the user inputs in the first element of the tuple and the arguments in the second element of the tuple. So let me try this. Let me print this, and first I want to print the user input dot interface, okay? And it works like this. So it is stored with the destination name. So you can reach the destination interface by saying that user inputs.interface and the other one with user inputs.mac_address. So now I can get the user inputs with a simple line here. So let me try this. Now I'm running the same command here, eth0 and MAC address to be this, and as you can see I get the eth0 in one line and the MAC address in another line. So at this point you might think to yourself, yeah, you knew this and you handled it well, but we didn't know that. Yeah, you're right, and I'm teaching you how to use it, but the other option is that you go and read the documentation. So this is the beauty of Python actually. So it has a lot of modules, packages and libraries that you can use, and you can find documentation easily online and use it on your own code. So interface will be saved in here and the MAC address will be saved in here. So now I can get these values and use it on my own subprocess.call, right? So it's really simple after that point. I suggest you pause the video and try to finish on your own. Just take these inputs and use it on your own code. I hope you managed to do that, so let me do it with you once more. I'm going to just delete these hashes, okay, so they're active again, and I don't need this interface and MAC address variables anymore because I can get directly from user inputs.interface, right? So rather than saying interface, and we don't have any interface at this point, I will say user inputs.interface, or I can just make this equal to a variable called user interface or something, okay, like this. User interface is now user inputs.interface, and this is user MAC or user MAC address, whatever you want, okay, and this is going to be equal to user inputs.MAC address. So now I have to change this to user underscore interface, okay, in these three lines all together, user interface, user interface, user interface. And rather than saying MAC address, let me do this as user MAC address. So now we are actually ready to take the user input and put it into use in our own code. So let me try this. Okay, so I'm going to call Python my macchanger.py, and I'm going to specify the interface like eth0 and the MAC address to be 111111222222. And if I hit enter, yeah, it gave me an error, cannot assign the requested address. So it really didn't change. So let me try this once more, because I believe the MAC addresses cannot start with this 11 thing. So rather than saying 11, let me say 00. Now it didn't give me any error. So let me do ifconfig once more. And as you can see, it really changed my MAC address. So we have completed the part 1 for our macchanger software. But believe me or not, this is not a good Python code. We can make it better, and we will do it better with introducing some new methods within the next lecture. So within the previous lecture, we managed to change our MAC address by getting an input from the user. So the user specified an interface and a MAC address, and our software actually changed it. So let me just try it with a different number from this, okay? So if I hit enter, it will say macchanger started, and if I do ifconfig, then I will see my MAC address has actually been changed. So within the following lectures, what I want to do is to refactor this code, okay? So that it would work the same, but it would be much better and also professional. So we are now just writing the codes and executing them, but we don't use any functions, for example. And we don't use any tools to actually control if the MAC address has been changed or not. So we were doing this manually throughout the previous lectures, remember? So we run our Python code in here, and then we run ifconfig to see if it actually changed the MAC address or not. But it will be better if we make this in here, right? If we write this as a code and let the software do it for us. We don't have to do it manually every time. So first of all, let me refactor this. So let me put all of the related items in related functions. Then we will implement other things in the following lectures. So we have adding options section in here, tab above, and below we have the subprocess calls. So maybe you can think of a way to group these codes, group these lines, and make it into a function so that we can use these functions whenever we need. Not only in this Python code, but also in the following codes that we're going to build throughout this course. Remember, we can import or just copy and paste the functions into other projects as well. So first of all, I'm going to define a function to change MAC address, okay? So I will call this MAC or change MAC, okay? So def change underscore MAC underscore address. And do we have to give input? Yeah, it would be good to give input of this user interface and user MAC address. So let me just choose everything here and hit tab so that it will be indented, okay? So let me give two inputs, user interface, okay? And the other input will be user MAC address, so that we can take this in as a input and then give it to the subprocess.call executions here. And of course, we know how to get these inputs from the user, right? We still have these opt parse things up above. And let me just add another function for those lines too. So we are getting user input in here, right? So let me say def get user input. And let me just take all of this and hit tab in order to be just place them under get user input function, okay? So within this function, I'm getting the input of user, then I'm going to make these adjustments as well and pass them to my change MAC address function. So if I get user input in here, then I have to return it, right? So I have to return so that I can cast to a variable later on. So let me just do this. Let me delete this, and rather than assigning to a variable in here, just return it. So if I return this parse object.parse arguments, so when I call this function, it will return me the arguments, then I can cast this to a variable, okay? So this won't work right now, so let me delete this. And yeah, my Mac changer started. Let me delete this as well, or just paste it below, okay, so that it won't get in the way. Okay, I think we are pretty clear right now. We have two functions and we can use them. So if I call get user input, what will happen? If I call get user input right here, it will return to me parse object.parse arguments, right? So within that parse arguments, I can get and supply it to change MAC address function. So what do? I assign these returning parse arguments to a tuple, right? So one is user input, the other one is the arguments, remember? And this is going to be equal to get user input. So this will return to me my tuple. Then I have to call change MAC address, and it will ask me for user interface. And how do we get it? User underscore input dot interface. And how do we get the MAC address? User input dot user MAC address, right? So now I have done the same thing with the previous code, but as you can see, it's a lot neater. So let me save this. So it's much more clear right now, and it's organized into functions. We can use them whenever we want. So let us test this because we made a lot of changes. Let us see if we broke something. So let me change this to 55 for example, okay? And once I hit enter, it will say my make changer started. And if I do if config, then I will see it has been really changed. So now as you can see, it's a lot neater and it's more clear what I'm doing. So once I organize this into functions, then it will be very easy for me to reuse these functions in another project. And I can do this. I can just make this into small just function names to make my code more clear. So let us stop here, and within the next lectures we're going to implement the features that I mentioned before to make our Mac changer more professional. Hi, within this lecture we're going to see how we can save the output of subprocess calls, okay? And why do we want that? Because I want to introduce a new feature where the software actually controls if the MAC address has been changed or not, as I said before. So when I type ifconfig, it really shows me the new MAC address, right? So first of all, I want to just save this ifconfig output to a variable inside of my code so that later on I can get the iter part out of that variable and check if it's really the new MAC that I have specified. So first I have to get this eth0 ifconfig thing, then get this iter part and just compare these two values. So I have mainly 3 steps here. But first of all, I have to run the ifconfig after I change the MAC address, and then I have to just save it to another variable. Okay? So we know how to run ifconfig, right? All we have to do is just say subprocess.call ifconfig. But it really doesn't show the output to the user. It really just calls the ifconfig, and in order to save the output, I'm going to show you another method. So let me just create this control new Mac function. Okay, we're going to do our thing in this function. So this is new, not new. Okay, and now I have to just create a variable called ifconfig, or you can choose whatever you want, and I'm going to use subprocess again, but rather than call, this time I will say check output. Okay, so how do I know this? Because I have read the documentation. So you just supply the same code, same commands in lists again. So ifconfig eth0 for example, and it won't just run the comment, but it actually checks the output of that comment. So if I type ifconfig eth0, it will run the ifconfig only for eth0, and it will show me the result of that. And we're going to get this exact result and save it to a variable called ifconfig under this function. So remember, we use the interface in here, so we have to get the same interface in this function as well, because maybe our user is not going to work with eth0, maybe he or she is going to work with WLAN O. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to delete eth0 from here and give interface as input. So now I'm okay. So let me print out this ifconfig variable so that we can check if it actually works. And of course I have to run and call this control new Mac function, and for interface I will say user input dot interface, as I did before. So I think we're done to check and test if our control new Mac function actually works. So let me run this command with another value, this time like 33, and let me hit enter. Now as you see, we changed the Mac to new address, and we also got the eth0 ifconfig output down below. Now actually we have completed the first part out of 3 for our execution of control new Mac. We have to get this ether part out of this text and then compare this ether part with the specified user input so that we can be sure if the MAC address has been really changed. So let's do that in the following lecture. Hi! Within this lecture we're going to find a way to process this eth0 output in here and get the MAC address, the ether part, out of that eth0 text and compare it to my MAC input given by user so that we can be sure MAC has been really changed. And in order to do that, we have to learn a new technique called regex or regex. So let me go to google.com and Google it out. So I suggest you guys do the same thing as well. So we are looking for an online regex editor Python, okay? And we will have like thousands of alternatives in here, and it really doesn't matter which one you choose. But what I found out is that there is a website called regex101.com, and it works pretty good. So maybe you can work with this one, maybe you can work with another one as well. So regex actually stands for regular expressions, and sometimes people pronounce this as regex, sometimes pronounce this as regex. You may choose whatever you want, but this actually lets us to filter out some characters inside of a text. If you go here down below, you will see that you have to use \s to filter any white space character. Okay, so if you do \d, you can filter out any digits. So W, you can filter out any word character, non-word character. As you can see, we have a lot of options to filter out, to process a text and get some values out of it. And here, as you can see, we're just looking for common tokens. We have anchors, meta sequences, group constructs. We have thousands of options to work with regular expressions. Of course, within a one single lecture, we cannot use and learn about all of them, but we can find a way to filter our ether part inside of our eth0 text in here. So let me copy this and let me go back to my regular expression editor here and paste it into this test string. And this online editor actually gives us the opportunity to work in real time and see what can we filter or not. So if I do something like this in here, okay, like I'm trying to do a backslash, and if I do backslash s, as you can see, I only get the spaces, and it highlights where I get down below, as you can see. Now since I did backslash s, now I'm getting s spaces. What I'm trying to do is find a regular expression that will highlight only my ether part. So if I do D, then it will do some digits, numbers. As you can see, it highlighted some single digit numbers. Then I'm making some progress, right? I have seen the part of either. Now if I do backslash D, now these are all highlighted, as you can see. But also there are some other digits as well. I'm looking for a regular expression that will only highlight the ether part, not the other ones. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this DD and maybe add some more to make only my ether part highlighted. So if I add a colon and then DD afterwards, as you can see, now I have eliminated other ones. So let me do it for 6 times. We have 6 pairs in MAC addresses, right? So if I do DD 6 times with colons, then only my ether will be highlighted. So now I found a way to highlight my MAC address, right? So I can use this regular expression in my code and get the MAC address out of there. But there is something wrong with this picture. Actually, MAC addresses can take the word values as well. So it can take these letters. So now I have 3A rather than 33. And remember, .d only gives us digits. So let me copy this and let me go back here and delete this and paste my new MAC. Okay, so right click and paste. And as you can see, it doesn't highlight it anymore, because rather than digits, I have to say character. And a way to do that is to, as you can see, digit doesn't highlight 3A here. So I have to find a way to include this word character as well. And we have seen what it was. It was W, any word character. So rather than saying D, let me say W here, okay? So let me do it one more time, 6 times, okay? Colon with colons, don't forget to add colons, and it will highlight only my MAC address this time, and it will be correct. And the beauty of this regular expression, it isn't valid only for Python, but you can use it in most of the other programming languages as well. So now let's stop here, and in the next lecture we're going to see how we can use it actually in our Python code. Hi, within this lecture we're going to just take the regular expression that we have created and apply it inside of our code. And in order to do that, we have to import a new library called RE. And this is how we work with regular expressions in Python. Okay? So rather than printing this if config in here, I'm going to use regular expression. So how do we use this RE module? Of course, you can read the documentation if you want, but this is very basic. I'm going to show you directly. This will return to me a new list-like object, and I'm going to show you how to use it, don't worry. And I'm going to call this new Mac, and we use re.search. Okay, and as you can see, it asks for a pattern and then a string. And the pattern is what we have created in the previous lecture, and the string is ifconfig. So remember the pattern, we used \w and we start with r. Okay, so ww column 6 times what we have written in the previous lecture. They have to be exact. Okay, and we start with r to specify this is a regular expression like we do in the string formatting. We started with f, remember? Okay, so it has to be 6 pairings, so 1 2 3 4. This is the 5th. Okay, 1 2 3 4, yeah, this is the 5th. And one more time, \w. Now I'm done with the pattern. I have to specify the string, and the string is of course the ifconfig that we got here. So now it will return to me not a string but as a list-like object. Why is that? Because maybe we get more than one pairings, more than one match, right? But we can also get no match at all, right? So we have to control if this new Mac exists. So I will say if new Mac. And it basically means that if this new Mac is true, if this is true, then I can do something with it. And it means that if I got a match out of that re.search, then I will return new Mac dot group. Okay, so this will return to me a group, and I want to take the first element out of that group. So I will say group, okay, 0. So like we do in the lists, or like we do in other list-like objects as well. Again, it will return to me a group of matches, and I will get the first result. And in this case I only get one result, but in other cases you may get more than one. So else I will return none, and basically it means that return nothing if it doesn't match. So let's take this from the beginning. We're controlling the new Mac and giving the interface as an input, and we use this interface to check the subprocess output, and we filter out this subprocess output variable ifconfig in here, and if it really matches we return the first element, and if it doesn't match we return nothing. And since we use control new Mac down below, now we have to specify, we have to assign this to a variable. Because why? Because now we are returning something, we are not printing out some results. So I'm going to call this finalized Mac, okay, and now I have the finalized Mac, right? All I have to do is just see if this finalized Mac is going to be equal to user input dot MAC address. So if my final MAC address is the same as the user input, it means that I have successfully changed the MAC address. So I'm going to print a message to the user saying that success, and if it doesn't, else, then there must be some error. Okay, so I can say like error or try again or specify a new MAC address. So let me test this. So let me just save this and minimize this. Let me clear the screen and run it with a different number this time, like 5A or 5B. Let me change this as well, 4D, okay? And if I hit enter right now, as you can see, it says success. Now if I run ifconfig, I will really see that my MAC address has been changed. So a really simple software, really simple ethical hacking tool in here, but we have learned a lot of new methods, a lot of new features, and we managed to do a very neat, a very clear Python code out of this execution. And I believe we are ready to finalize this Mac changer by just controlling if it works with Python 3 as well. And let's stop here and do that in the following lecture. Hi, within this lecture we're going to control our Mac changer to be compatible with Python 3 as well. We have learned Python 3 with the latest technology, but sometimes some libraries or some modules can be compatible or incompatible with Python 3 in our code, so we have to make sure that this works with Python 3 as well. Okay, and we're going to do that for every ethical hacking tool that we will write in our course. So now our code actually works pretty well with Python 2 as we have tested. So let me minimize this and run the same code again, same command again, and I will show you how to write commands specific to Python 3 as well. Now if I run this, so let me do it like 4 and 3 for example. Okay, so I'm just testing this once more, and I see that my Mac changer actually works. Now let me do it for another number, okay, but rather than saying Python, I will say Python 3. So now it will compile this and run this for Python 3 rather than just Python 2. And if I run this, I will see that I get an error. And if you look at the error, it really suggests that you have to focus on line 32 and 22, okay, and we have a type error. We are using a string pattern on bytes like object. So if you get any error like this, you know what to do, right? You just Google it and try to find a solution on Stack Overflow or any other website actually. But let me show you what is this in this case. So I'm going to, if you look at 22, line 22 as it suggested, we're getting this if config in here, but subprocess.checkoutput actually doesn't give us a string. It gives us a byte-like object, okay? And in Python 2, it really understands it, but we have to cast this as a string in Python 3, okay? So all I have to do is just this string if config. And it really goes the same thing for 32 as well. In this finalized Mac, we're controlling the name Mac and we're getting an interface, but we have to specify this to be a string as well. So I'm going to do the string thing again down here. So I have changed the line 22 and 32 as it suggested and converted them to be strings and cast them to be strings. So if I run Python 3 once more and let me change some values here, yeah, it works. So if I do if config, now it is the same. So in order to be sure, let's rerun this again with different values this time and use some 15, okay, and run this with Python 2. Now it works here as well. So we have a very compatible Mac changer Python script that works both with Python 2 and Python 3. So now let's stop here, and within the next lecture we're gonna start building some network scanner.